Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel Heartwarming Tales. It was a cold evening in the city, the kind of evening when lights reflected on wet pavements and people hurried home with warm food and tired smiles. Inside a small bakery tucked between two tall buildings, a young mother named Clara stood by the counter, her fingers nervously gripping a crumpled receipt. The faint smell of vanilla and sugar filled the air, and the birthday balloons she had chosen earlier that week still hung behind her, deflated and dusty. Today was supposed to be her son Daniel's 8th birthday, but as she looked at the cake box on the counter and the woman waiting for payment, her heart sank deeper. Clara had been struggling ever since her husband left. Working 2 jobs barely kept the lights on, and her son's excitement about a small birthday party was something she had clung to, until now. She opened her wallet and counted the few bills inside. It wasn't enough. The woman behind the counter gave her a sympathetic look, but Clara felt her cheeks burn with shame. She whispered that she couldn't afford it, and asked them to cancel the order. The room went silent for a moment, broken only by the soft hum of the refrigerator. Behind her, sitting quietly at a corner table, was a man who had watched the entire scene unfold. He was tall, dressed in an expensive gray suit, the kind that seemed out of place in a small neighborhood bakery. His name was Ethan Ward, a billionaire entrepreneur whose company stretched across the city skyline. He had come there not for business but for solitude, escaping a world of boardrooms, cameras, and hollow conversations. He was used to people treating him like an icon, but what he saw in Clara was something rare, raw, painful honesty. Clara turned to leave, clutching her coat tightly around her. Her son Daniel waited outside wearing a paper hat from last year's party, holding a small gift he had wrapped himself. "Did you get the cake, Mom?" he asked, eyes shining with hope. Clara forced a smile and lied softly. "They'll make it later, sweetheart. Maybe tomorrow." But inside, her heart shattered. Ethan watched her leave, and something inside him stirred, a memory of his own childhood, when his mother had done everything to make his birthdays special, even when they had nothing. That night he couldn't get Clara and her little boy out of his mind. He found himself calling the bakery owner, quietly asking for details about the canceled order. The next day he returned with a different plan. When Clara came home from work that evening, exhausted and still trying to comfort her disappointed son, she heard a knock on the door. Daniel ran to open it, and there stood the same bakery owner, holding a massive, beautifully decorated birthday cake, surrounded by balloons, gifts, and a note that simply said, "For Daniel, happy birthday from a friend who believes every child deserves a smile." Clara froze, tears instantly spilling from her eyes. She tried to refuse, saying there must be a mistake, but the woman only smiled and said, "A man asked us to deliver it. He said he'd explain later." Daniel squealed with joy, his face lighting up like sunshine after rain. For the first time in months, laughter filled the small apartment. The boy's excitement filled the room as he clapped his hands and said, "Mom, someone made my wish come true." Clara couldn't speak. She only watched him blow out his candles, his laughter echoing through the tiny home. The next morning, Clara decided to go back to the bakery to find out who had done this. When she arrived, Ethan was there again, standing near the counter, ordering a coffee like any other day. Their eyes met, and she instantly recognized him. She hesitated, then walked up to him, whispering, "Was it you?" Ethan smiled gently, the kind of smile that hid years of loneliness. He simply nodded and said, "Every child deserves a birthday, don't you think?" She thanked him repeatedly, her voice trembling. But Ethan shook his head. "Don't thank me. You've already given him something far more valuable than money ever could, a mother who never gives up." After that day, something shifted between them. Ethan began stopping by the bakery more often, sometimes to talk, sometimes just to watch Clara laugh as she picked up small treats for her son. She learned that behind his wealth, he was a man who had lost touch with the simple joys of life. His parents had passed away when he was young, and despite all his success, he had never truly celebrated a birthday again. Clara's story reminded him what mattered most. One weekend, he invited Clara and Daniel to a charity event he was hosting for underprivileged children. Clara hesitated. She didn't belong in a world of suits and chandeliers, but Ethan insisted it wasn't about money, it was about people. When she arrived with Daniel, everyone welcomed them warmly. Daniel's eyes widened at the giant balloons, games, and the biggest cake he had ever seen. Ethan stood beside them, smiling proudly, watching the boy laugh with other children. Later that evening, as the event quieted and soft music played, Clara found herself standing beside Ethan on the balcony, overlooking the glowing city. She whispered, "Why did you help us?" Ethan looked down at the streetlights and said, "Because I know what it's like to feel forgotten. I wanted him to have one memory that would remind him the world isn't as cold as it seems." Clara's eyes softened. For years she had carried her struggles alone, never expecting kindness from anyone. But Ethan's sincerity melted the walls she'd built around her heart. Over time, their connection deepened, not through luxury but through small, quiet moments. Watching Daniel draw pictures in Ethan's office, sharing simple dinners, laughing over spilled coffee, it was as if life had decided to give them both a second chance. Months passed and Daniel grew closer to Ethan, calling him Mr. Ethan, though everyone could see the bond forming between them. On Daniel's 9th birthday, Ethan surprised them again. This time not with gifts, but with something much more meaningful. As the candles flickered, he knelt down beside the boy and said, "Would you mind if I stick around for more birthdays?" Daniel hugged him tightly, and Clara couldn't hold back her tears. Ethan had gone from a lonely billionaire to a man who found family in the most unexpected place. A struggling single mother and her hopeful little boy. And for Clara, the man who had once seemed unreachable became the heart she didn't know she was waiting for. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Heartwarming Tales. Stories like this remind us that kindness can change a life, and that sometimes the smallest act of compassion can bring the greatest happiness. Now, tell us in the comments, would you have done the same if you were in Ethan's place?